Greetings and welcome everyone to this week's episode of Poly Weekly News. I'm your host David Danto, and as we get toward the end of the year, most people think about holidays and being with family, and I do that as well. But I also think about God. I got to get my reservations in for all the conferences in calendar year first quarter. As I've mentioned on the show before, and we'll talk about again, in the next few weeks. I'm going to be at CES in January, which is the 1 year mark of me hosting the show, which is awesome. And then after that, end of January, early February, I'll be in Barcelona for the ISE conference. And then as we start to get into March, the next big conference, and probably one of the biggest in our industry in collaboration, is Enterprise Connect, which is taking place in Orlando. And joining me on the show this week are my good friends and industry colleagues, Brent Kelly and Kevin Kieller. Brent has always been the host of one of the most interesting and fascinating and educational sessions at Enterprise Connect. And you used to do that with Phil, but I'm told Phil's retiring this year. So we'll get into that and talk about all of it. Before we do that, Brent, why don't you start? Introduce yourself, tell everybody who you are and what you do.
All right. Well, thanks, David. It's good to be here. And Kevin, it's good to work with you. So my name is Brent Kelly. I am a principal analyst at an analyst firm called Omdia. Omdia is a conglomeration of several other analyst firms that Informa has purchased. And it turns out, David, that Enterprise Connect and Omdia are owned by Informa. And so now I'm working very closely with the Enterprise Connect team, even closer, in fact. I've been an industry analyst since about the year 2001 and have watched this industry grow up and expand and go from just a few collaboration companies to multi-billion-dollar industries and so forth, and have been part of this session that we're going to talk about today at Enterprise Connect for the last 7 or 8 years. And it's a real pleasure this year to have Kevin working with me. Phil Edholm, as you mentioned, he retired. And so Kevin and I have wanted to work together for a long, long time. And so this is a real privilege for me to be able to work with Kevin. So Kevin, tell us who you are.
Well, thanks, Brent. That's a lovely introduction, and I have big shoes to fill, replacing Phil Edholm on this session. My name is Kevin Kieller. I'm the co-founder and lead analyst at a company called Enable UC, which is a much smaller boutique consulting organization. We help organizations get the most out of predominantly the Microsoft ecosystem. That's kind of where we're getting the most traction. That's not all where our expertise is, but I'll say most of the work I do is around Microsoft Teams because there's a lot of interest there. And increasingly as well, I work with vendors helping them decode and, foster and prosper inside the Microsoft ecosystem as well. But this, opportunity to work on this session is fantastic because it allows me to use the other, outside of just the Microsoft space. And then we'll talk about that session, I guess, further. So back to you.
Absolutely. Thank you, gentlemen, and both of you have been on this webcast before. So, not only do I know you, but you're old friends of the people who watch this webcast. So we'll have to get a group of those 9 or 10 people. That's actually more than that, but we'll get people together. So thank you again for joining. So Enterprise Connect, as I said, is taking place from March 27th to 30th. At the Gaylord Palms in Orlando. I've always had a love-hate relationship with the Gaylord Palms, and I won't get into that at this particular time. But tell us, Brent, because you've been involved with it for a long time, how would you describe Enterprise Connect while standing on one foot? What do you say the show is?
Well, for me, it is the industry event for this industry. It's the must attend event. For me, in addition to the educational programs, it's a time for networking. It's a time for reacquainting myself with with all the people in the industry, pressing the flesh, so to speak, and just being in really close proximity to everyone and anyone who happens to be a part of this industry. So I love going. It's the highlight of the year for me, frankly.
Yeah. And Kevin, I've been attending this for a number of years, and I know you have as well. Both of you have, but Kevin, I don't really necessarily call this an end user show, although there are plenty of end users that attend, and I do roundtable dinners and events with them there. But this is really an industry show. This is an analyst show. This is where manufacturers and analysts and people that are involved in it get to speak with each other. Do you feel the same? I mean, is that your reaction to it?
Yeah, absolutely. I remember, I think this will be my 12th year. So I remember walking in the first time and there was, because I'm also part of the BC Strategies team, and there was like on a pillar, like a picture of the BC Strategies team, including me. And I was just like, wow, this show is big. And, as Brent said, it is everybody in the industry and all of the vendors. And I actually like Gaylord Palms. I like the alligators. It feels like coming home, right? So, because I'm familiar with the layout. But what is so awesome is, as opposed to, you can go to Microsoft Ignite and WebEx One and Zoomtopia and Ring Central, and it's, you hear their pitch. But I think at Enterprise Connect, you hear all the pitches simultaneously, and you can, walk from one booth to the other and compare and contrast how they're talking about sometimes the same feature. And it's almost like they don't know that they each have it, or they describe it differently. So I love not only the people, but all the conversations. And a lot of times you get groups of, friendly competitors and colleagues together to just talk about, the industry as a whole. And I find that fascinating. So like Brent, I absolutely look forward to this. And it is really the highlight of the conferences that I go to.
And we have to admit that in our industry, as in many, it's a little bit like a volleyball game where people are rotating through different companies. As somebody blows a whistle, and all of a sudden somebody who was in company A is now with company B, and company C is now part of company D, or in our particular case, Poly is now part of HP. It's the faces stay the same in many cases, but the roles sometimes change. And this is a place where you can really go to catch up. And one of the things I really love doing is sitting out in the big atrium. Either during one of the meals or just during the day when I've got a break, and people just come up to you that you haven't seen either for a year or for months or for years, and you start to get into these impromptu conversations. And again, it's a people industry. It's all about relationships. Every industry is. And with ours, and last year was even better, because last year, coming off of the pandemic, there was a lot more hugging than usual, and we've talked about that in the past, where the hugging wasn't so much that I liked the person I was hugging, it's the fact that I liked that I was able to hug someone or shake hands or whatever.
Yeah, I think that there was euphoria last year. Like, people were just, for many people, it was the first, big show or show at all that they had been to, and I'm hopeful that enthusiasm, maybe it won't be a euphoria, but maybe it'll be enthusiasm, but I expect that enthusiasm will be there, at the end of March in 2023.
Well, I've actually got a blog out right now talking about, under the title, Where's the Beef? At the first trade show we went to last year, it was just great to see people again. And we really didn't care that people didn't have new products and nothing was shipping and there was a supply chain issue. And then at the second show, it was nice to see them. And then the third show and the fourth show, you know what? It's not going to fly this year. This year, we're going to expect actual announcements and actual products and actual things. So from a vendor standpoint, it's really going to be a put up or don't come kind of situation. But one of the key things you get at Enterprise Connect, which you don't get at many shows, is really valuable education. Yes, there are still some sessions that are kind of advertisements couched as education, but yours certainly isn't. It's one of the ones I look forward to. Brent, why don't you give us like 2 minutes to explain the history of it and what it's going to be like this year?
Okay. Well, so this particular event, it started out, like I say, about 7 or 8 years ago. And we were talking about Cisco and Microsoft, because at the time, those were the two big behemoths in the industry. And that's where a lot of the attention was. And so we contrasted and we compared those two offerings. And that particular way of doing it, it made this the largest non-plenary session in the entire Enterprise Connect show. And people have repeatedly come up to Phil and I, and they said, this one show had so much value and so much information in it that it made it worth it for us to come to Enterprise Connect just for this one show. Well, as we got near the pandemic and so forth, and we saw what was happening with people adopting collaboration, unified communications, and so forth, cloud-based services, well, Zoom needed to be in that mix, because all of a sudden Zoom was on everybody's desktop, Zoom was on everybody's mobile device and so forth. And so we felt like because of the penetration, the real rapid penetration that Zoom had, we needed to include them. And then about a year ago, we decided to include RingCentral, primarily because RingCentral was focusing on, let's call it the incumbent play. And so I call it the three A's in the M: Atos, Alcatel-Lucent, Avaya, and Mitel, where they have these partnerships with those incumbent legacy PBX vendors to sell effectively RingCentral services to their SMB market base effectively. And so also RingCentral has these relationships with some major mobile carriers. And so there's some real serious and significant penetration opportunities there for RingCentral. Have they realized all of that? No, of course not. But we felt like, given what Ring was trying to do, it was these three players, Microsoft, Cisco, and Zoom, that were on top. Ring is trying to get there and so forth. And so that's why we've expanded it now to include these four players. And as Kevin pointed out to me yesterday in a conversation we had, if you look at the Gartner Magic Quadrant, they're all four up in the upper right. And so you can't go wrong with any of them. But what we try to do is we contrast and compare. We show some ways that, yeah, there's a lot of similarities, but there are some differences in these. And so that's kind of the history. And one of the reasons why we don't have the vendors present is so that in this case, Kevin and I, we can present our real and honest opinions. What do we think about these companies? What do we think about their products and services? And what do we think about, how they market different things? And where's kind of some of the holes in these offerings and so forth? We are able to tell that story because we're not burdened with having a panel of vendors effectively to that we have to please. Sure. It's Kevin and I telling what we want to do, right, what we want to say, what we really think. And that's why this session, in my mind, is so valuable.
And I will point out that whichever one of those four entities an end user organization will go with, the Poly gear is 100% natively compatible with it, which is one of the things I'm very proud of. Finally being part of the industry where there's no more forklift changes. Yeah. You can actually just go for the best service that you want and then just reboot into using that service. So that's really good. And the content now is so big. For the last couple of years, the one session wasn't enough, right? You break it up into two.
Right, well, it's going to be two parts. Yeah.
Yeah, we've always had 90 minutes. But we just feel like the the session is so heavy with content that we need a little bit of a break in there. Plus, it's often after lunch. And so, you have the after lunch kind of effect too, where people need to stand up for just a minute.
Yeah, I think right now we're scheduled to be Tuesday the 28th from 3 o'clock to 4:45 is where. So I guess maybe it's a little bit, you can work off your lunch or take a walk after lunch or what have you. But, I want to build on what Brent said, because while it is what he and I think, we've started working on this months ago, and it's a lot of, it's a lot of effort. And I think what we're trying to, we're not going to declare some solution as best. As we're looking at the Magic Quadrant. You can't lose with any of the four vendors we're looking at, but I think we contend you could win better for your organization. So what we want to do is we want to look at material or key differences between the platforms, because there are, and we want to say, hey, why might it matter to you and your organization? What type of organization might this matter to? And here's some differences. So we're not going to say platform A has 117 features and platform B has 118 and, whoop-de-doo. They all have more features than anybody right now is using, but there are differences in terms of device support. As you said, Poly is natively can work with all of those, but there are different device vendor selections or types of devices that are available or not available on some of the platforms. Data residency, geographical scope, things like everybody has AI, but what languages are supported? And once again, that may or may not matter to you. So what Brent and I are really trying to be laser focused on is, okay, where are material differences that matter in the real world? And as there's lots of content, we're doing lots of work, and I just I'm thrilled to be working with Brent, and as I said, big shoes to fill. So I'm just trying not to screw it up.
Oh, I'm sure you won't. While you're talking, you reminded me of one of the jobs that I had when I was a consultant. We were hired by an organization to do an evaluation between two of the bigger vendors. And I was the person running the project as a neutral stance. And we had one of our specialists from one of the vendors and one of our specialists from the other vendor, and we were going to come up with some criteria and ranking and weighted averages and put it all together. And I remember that one of the specialists, this was without naming names of the person or the thing, wouldn't rate any of the features of that platform anything less than 10 on a scale of 1 to 10. And we were trying to come up with some honest answers, and well, right. I'm a 10. Well, it's got to be. It's the better than everybody. So it's not always a very easy thing to do to compare and contrast honestly. I guess, Kevin, I'll ask you. You attended this session before, right? You were there with yeah.
Every year, yeah.
So what do you bring any unique or different perspective to it that hasn't been there before?
Well, I think I think we are trying to, I think when it started, my take, and Brent was leading it. So, there was a lot more when it was the Cisco Microsoft kind of page match. A lot more of it was on pricing, and so I think. Now I really see, I think 2023 is going to be the, battle of the bundles or the sweet showdown. I think we've seen all of the vendors get aggressive and start bundling. And so pricing, we're still going to look at it and talk about it, but it is hard to kind of decode and decouple because the bundles have become bigger. So I would say, our emphasis probably will be less on pricing. And also, I think, as we've moved into, for example, AI, Brent and I do want to spend some time explaining, for some of these, what is this? Why should you even be concerned about this? Because everybody has this, pitch, like everybody has now with AI added, right? And so we're going to try to figure out what use cases might be of value and explain that a little bit. And then, I think that the last thing is, and I'm just trying to remember what I was going to say. What is the last thing, Brent? I don't know. So Brent, from your perspective, how is it going to be different this year? Or what is the subtle shift that maybe you and I have versus you and Phil?
Well, I really like what you said, the battle of the bundles. So we're going to talk about that. One of the fun things that we do, that we've started doing is we're kind of testing maybe a functionality. So for those of you that may have attended 2 years ago, you may have seen Phil Edholm going like this back and forth. And we were showing the differences in the artifacts in the background, virtual backgrounds that everybody adopted really, really quickly. But there were some holes and there was some goofiness in a few of these backgrounds. Last year, we took another AI capability, which was the noise cancellation and so forth. And we ran a script through that, and we had sirens and fire engines and typing and stuff like that. And we compared and contrasted the four solutions. I'm just going to do a teaser this year. Kevin and I are going to do something else. We're not going to tell you what it is.
That's right.
But it's going to be another AI capability that I think is super important. I think both of us think it's super important, and it lays the foundation for some of the other AI capabilities, not just for our unified communication solutions, but also for contact centers. And so that's going to be a fun little part of the show that Kevin and I are working on doing that. So yeah, it's just an opportunity for us to contrast and compare. So Kevin mentioned artificial intelligence, bundles. One of the things that we're seeing is the differentiators are coming in the adjacencies. Events is an example of an adjacency. And so, the core things, voice, video, messaging, those are generally pretty consistent amongst the platforms. But there are some differences, but there are some things on these adjacencies or maybe on the periphery that might be important to a particular company or a particular group within your company. This year, too, we're going to talk about this concept of the multicast, meaning that I don't know of any organization that uses just one tool, quite frankly. Yeah, you may choose one internally, but then you've got to use Zoom or WebEx or Microsoft Teams or whatever for the people that you have to work with externally, or even for different groups internally. And so we're going to be talking about that too.
That
multicast.
That actually raises a question that I was going to ask you, which is, I'm on record as saying, 100 years from now, we're going to have flying cars, we're going to have automated robot doctors that can do surgery on you, and we'll still be arguing about why interoperability doesn't work. There's got to be a level of understanding now beyond it works. It's almost going back to the early days of video communication where there was the base collaboration, but if you were in a same system, it would be better. So like if I'm connecting from platform A to platform B, I can do it with a third party. I can do it with the direct guest join, but that works better in some platforms and worse in others. Or it was now introduced, and again, I don't want to use too many names here, but one of the platforms has allowed one of the carriers to have dual connectivity on their platform, which they're saying is a unique case. But honestly, I think that's the genie out of the bottle. So I think we're going to start to see other unique cases like that. Are you going to get into some of these, what the differences between just working versus interoperability working well?
Yes, that is, because to Brent's point, and this multicast kind of term is I think something that Brent, you originally came up with, in recognition that, both platforms and also, UCaaS and CCaaS and UCaaS and CPaaS and, people are building solutions with those adjacencies. So we're not just like laser focused on evaluating the UCaaS, but how does it integrate with the things that in a real business you need to integrate it to? And the other kind of thing that we're trying to do is like, we love, as we mentioned, all of these 4 vendors are in the leaders quadrant of the magic, of the Gartner Magic Quadrant. And, that means that they have great vision and great ability to execute according to Gartner. But with this vision, one of the things is vendors have lots of aspirations, and in their marketing, it is sometimes difficult to figure out, are they talking about a feature that's shipping, is going to ship, or is it like aspirational, like down the road? And so in our evaluation, we're really working hard to compare what's in the current versions. And then we have a section that talks about the future, because it's my belief that every vendor will tell you that in version N+1, N being the current version, so every problem is fixed in version N+1. So aspirations sometimes exceed execution. So we're going to try to help the audience understand what's really in the here and now around some of these capabilities and categories. And, I think we're looking at mobile support, because that's increasingly becoming and including like frontline support. How do these solutions support, I hate to say hybrid work, I'm sick and tired, but flexible work styles, let's call it, because there are differences in the platforms in terms of, people embracing it. Although I think all the platforms have claimed that they are the hybrid work platform of choice. So we're going to kind of drill down into that a little bit and highlight some key differences.
Okay,
yeah, I think too.
Go ahead, Brent.
I think too, we're going to bring into, because Omdia is a big data company, we'll bring in some market data too that'll be kind of interesting and just kind of show. One of the things that I'm going to try to do is show market share for UCaaS, and we'll at least, people kind of have an idea of where these companies are, but I track that personally as an analyst within Omdia, and so we'll show some of that kind of stuff and a little bit of other market data on where devices are, what's happening to these UCaaS devices that you'll hook into these systems and so forth. So we'll bring in a little bit of that to kind of spice things up just a little bit.
And Kevin, when you were talking about aspirational, you reminded me of of a recent blog that I wrote as well, that you're getting a lot of that from the hardware manufacturers as well. Some of the biggest announcements in our industry over the last month have been about products that aren't available and won't be available for a year. So, I advise, end users and people that are looking to purchase to make their decisions based on products that are actually out now that they can touch and try and feel, because there have been recent cases where announced products were never built, or were never built to spec. So, it's if you haven't seen the movie Wag the Dog, go find it on one of the streaming systems. And anybody can claim that they've got something, but you actually have to touch it and feel it and hear it and see that it's working before you can believe that N+1. That goes for the hardware just as well as the software. So
yeah, good point.
It sounds like you guys are again putting together an awesome session, probably the session of the event, plus or minus the keynote, certainly, as you point out, the best classroom session. Not taking anything away from any of the other ones, but it's really there. T-shirts. You have to make up T-shirts. I attended Brent and Kevin's session. You remember Brent in the old days of Wayne House, where anybody answered a question got thrown a T-shirt. You're gonna have to pick that one up again, just so that I can say that I was there.
Yeah.
So let me ask you both, if anybody wants to get more information. First of all, and it's perfectly okay to say no to this. No sandbag questions here. Do you have any speaker codes yet for discounted registration, or not yet?
I saw an email yesterday from Stacy, who coordinates all the speakers. I haven't actually read. Not
yet. Okay. So for now, we're telling people to go to enterpriseconnect.com. But in the interim, they can probably reach out to you if they're, once you guys have your sessions established. And I'm going to ask people how to get in touch with you the best way that you prefer, because there may be a discount code. I remember over the years that speakers get a code that you can provide. So Brent, if somebody wants to get more information from you about what you do, work with you, or this session, how could they reach out to you?
Well, you can just reach out to me at my Omdia email address, and that is Brent, BRENT, .Kelly, KELLY, at Omdia, OMDIA.com. Pretty simple.
Kevin, same question for you.
Yeah, so I think you can just look me up on LinkedIn. So Kevin, my last name Kieller, K-I-E-L-L-E-R. And I do want to point out that I'm also running the session that drills down on Microsoft Teams, and a new session, because contact center is big, and last year I got contact center got all, I don't know, there was lots of focus on that. Microsoft Teams is big, so for the first time I'm running a new session that's how you can add your contact center and should you to Microsoft Teams. So I'm going to look at that as well. So I've certainly come to Brent in my session, but if you've kind of picked a path or are leaning in a particular direction, check out some of my other sessions as well.
I would endorse that, because I go to Kevin's sessions. I go to Kevin's sessions to learn from Kevin. So those are really good.
That's what my late father used to say, is the day you stop learning is the day you're dead. You always want to stay fresh and have an open mind. I will have the general manager of Enterprise Connect, Eric Krapp, on a later show, probably in January or February. I'll ask you two gentlemen to come back on and maybe give us another preview, this time with slides. And we can talk about Enterprise Connect. But it's definitely one of the most important shows. Like I said, and I'm sharing the slide with you guys now as I put this together. I will be at CES. I will be at ISE in Barcelona. It's a long trip, but it's worth it to see the people there. And I'm one of the influencers there, and I will certainly be at Enterprise Connect. If you're planning that, please reach out to me. I'm happy to see you and chat with you and help you understand how great the HP Poly products and solutions are, and help you in any other way that I can. So I'm david.danto@hp.com. Gentlemen, thank you very much for being on the show this time.
Thanks for the invite.
Yeah, thank you very much, David, and happy holidays to everyone.
Happy holidays to everyone. So for everyone at HP and Poly, my name is David Danto. Thank you for joining us. We'll see you next week.